Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 913 for July the 17th, 2023. This is the pre-show, the magical, marvelous part of this program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we say some outrageous things. Yeah, most people listen to this. They don't get the pre-show magic here. But I thought I'd get on time tonight. It's like, and if you're looking for the show content, move the slider over about 10 minutes. But I thought I'd get on a little early tonight. Got a lot of folks coming. It's going to be a very good show tonight. We're talking about beach weather, beach safety, very appropriate for this time of the year. But we are in the dog days of summer. Dog days of summer. And I think the whole gang's going to be here tonight as I do look at my notes, and that's going to be good. Got some folks coming in from Weather Service and other things to talk about the beach. And we've had some problems this year. It's been rough with rip currents on the central Gulf Coast. We have had some very unfortunate loss of life. And the Weather Service down in Mobile, they do a great job with awareness and trying to get the public involved in understanding the dangers of rip currents. Former Southeastern Conference quarterback Ryan Mallett was one of the ones, and I don't know if he was involved in a rip current. I know that he drowned down in the Florida Panhandle, but it's been just a rough year down there. So we will be doing that. And again, the schedule should be intact here for the rest of July. Looking at the schedule, had some people asking. In the way I do my vacation, I get 3 weeks a year. That's it, 3 weeks. I take 1 week toward late June, which we've done. I will take 1 week around the first week of August, and that's the next one coming up. So the July the 31st show, we will be producing that prior week. And then after that, the next one's at Christmas. So everything will be on Monday nights. So again, July 31st, which is the next Monday, we will be shifting that program. Will probably do it Thursday, July 27th. And I think that'll work. But anyway, Mr. Murray, our guest booking officer, is here. All right. I see some guests showing up. They're early. I like it. Scott, can you hear me? Vicky, Olivia, hello.
Hey there, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Scott, where are you from? Where are you located?
Right now I'm in Starkville, but I'm originally from Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
So you're in Stark Vegas.
hmm
Have you ever been to the Little Dewey?
I have. It's been a while, but I have been there before. It's pretty good.
Yeah, they love me. Vicky, can you hear us okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. And I should refer to you as Vicky, right?
Yeah, Vicky or Victoria.
You tell me which one. I'm the driver of this machine here. I'll get everybody to adhere to your request. You pick it.
Go with Vicky.
Okay. Well, I will do that. I have a bad Vicky story. The first girl I ever dated, and I was a social zero. I mean, I was a classic social zero. I mean, I never went to a prom, never went to a homecoming dance. I worked. I went to school. I had very little social skill, but I finally started dating this girl. And the first girl I ever dated seriously, her name was Vicky, and she dumped me. Oh, it was bad. I mean, broke my heart. But so and her name was Vicky. But I know that you would never do that to anybody.
Nope. Hopefully, I can redeem the name Vicky.
Yes. No. You got it. But thanks for coming on tonight. Yeah, I will. And again, for those that are coming on here, that we are live on YouTube now, but this is not part of the produced show that goes out to the world in the audio form. And about 75% of the people that consume this show listen to it. So that's why we say during the pre-show, we tell boring personal stories. And that, for those that asked, that was a boring personal story. Humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. So that's I've already got one boring personal story checked off the list. And she was a very nice person, and I deserved to be dumped. I totally deserved it. I mean, I was No, I just no, I totally deserved it. But it worked out in the next year. I started dating a young woman, and we were married 6 months later, and 42 years later, we're still married. So there you go. It all works out. Bill, who did that song, God Bless the Broken Road? Rascal Flatts?
That's not on my playlist, James.
What do you mean? You've never heard
No.
that song?
No, that sounds like a JB song.
No, that's one of the great country classics from this is from 10 or 15 years ago.
Charlie Pride. Well, no, I don't do country after 1977, probably. So my country is limited to Willie and Waylon and all those guys, and Charlie Pride, the classics. My notebook has removed from my
Bill just he abandoned ship right in the middle of the show here. He's gone. Now he's trying to.
I left my notebook in Gadsden, Alabama today. I got to go back.
He's trying to notice that Bill is trying to impress us with that skew T back there in the background. He's got a sounding up from somewhere, and I'm trying to see if I can figure out which one that is.
That's Buff Kit. That's that. We do this inversion forecast for that blasting company down in
Yes. Well, Buff Kit is an oldie but a goodie. An oldie but a goodie.
Maybe somebody on here could tell me a better way to do it, but it's
I think it's great. But Buff Kit is an amazing tool. I mean, it's because
I can tell them when the inversion's going to break, and when they can resume blasting, and it's worked really well.
All right. So we'll see. And again, for all of our guests here, we'll hit local television. This is simulcast on local television. We'll hit that at the top of the hour, and that's when we typically start the show here. So
do we have Joe Ethan with us? Has he joined us? Hey, Scott, I see you.
We got Scott, and we have Vicky, and we have Morgan.
It's like I told everybody, Scott, we were having company over tonight. Everybody invited somebody. So we've got a really jam-packed show tonight about rip currents. But we need Joe Ethan.
Now, I invited the two that I was told to invite. So there might be others.
You did good. I invited Joe Ethan and Scott. And and I also invited Brett Lessinger, who's the beach safety chief in Orange Beach. I hope they got that invite okay. Morgan, did you see it come by when I sent it? Scott obviously did, because I invited him.
I invited Morgan.
Morgan's like really frozen, or that's her avatar.
Well, she's had enough of this. I mean, she's done with it. She's seen this, and she's decided she's going to run. And we tell our guests this is the best time to run right now before it starts.
She's been here before, so she knows.
Well, she knows the ruckus she's getting into here.
I think she's actually working a shift tonight, so looks like she's concentrating very hard on something there. So.
Oh goodness. So Bill, my favorite thing to do back in the 80s was to go see JB when he was working the night shift, this shift. And I would stop by the Hardee's at Oxmoor Road and I-65, and he would call it a Hardy party. And I would come down there with a bunch of hamburgers and junk, and Joe Wheeler and all these guys were down there. Goodness, we had laughs. I mean, it was just, and obviously when the weather's quiet, I mean, I'm not, but yeah, I have very fond memories of the Hardy parties on the night shift.
I used to pick them up Jim and Nick's or something that was there when I was.
I'm a cheapskate. That's too much money. I'd go to the Hardee's. This is a lot cheaper when you go to Hardee's.
Well, I'd get like the 2-pound barbecue feast, and carry it up there. It would go a long, long way. It's interesting. I saw some weather history this week where I had a note during the 1980 heat wave that Harold Quattlebaum was in the Birmingham newspaper. And I've been reading this book, about the famous television meteorologist who's passed away in Jacksonville, recently. Been reading his sort of memoir. And, Harold Quattlebaum's in that book back in the 60s. So he must have hopped around a little bit. He was in Jacksonville, I think. Would it be the same? It had to be the same Harold Quattlebaum. There couldn't be two of them.
No.
I thought that was interesting. The Chiefs are together.
That's right.
That's pretty neat how they do that trick. One disappears and the other one appears. One disappears, the other one appears.
Hey, that's cool.
I don't know how to change it.
All those people in South Alabama look fancy, James. What is the deal?
It's a very upscale. It's not Alabama. It's a different world down there.
L.A.
Yeah, the redneck Riviera. I could tell some Gulf Shore stories, but we're not going to tell Gulf Shore stories. Those are I've already told one. I've already offended Vicky. I've already told a bad personal story, and she's mad at me. So,
what'd you do before I got here?
Well, I just told a bad story. I shouldn't have told that story. I see that name and I had PTSD because she spelled it Vicky as well. But it's all good. Here comes Kim, and here comes Troy, and I think we're getting close to having the gang all here. I do not see. Got a full house. All right. Well, let's roll it. We are at the top of the hour. Welcome to our television viewers that are watching on the TV side. It's Monday night. So we're going to roll WeatherBrains on the TV side, and we're live on the YouTube. We are now recording. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Uh-oh, that's real smooth. That was a great start. False start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains episode number 913. This is the weekly show all about weather, the world's oldest podcast. We started this in January of 2006, and they said it wouldn't last. What do they know? Got a full house tonight. It's going to be a good show. Very excited to open things up here. I see we got Troy Kimmel from the land of the heat. Troy, are you hot?
Up 212 today. It's the warmest temperature on the face of the earth. And forever and ever. And it's just amazing. It's just out of control. Maybe it's like 108, I think.
Okay. October's coming. I see that they're doing Southeastern Conference Media Days this week. So when you see the football media day guys doing their thing, you know that football season is coming, fall is coming. We will get over the hump here. Let's go up to Oklahoma. Rick Smith, how you doing on the heat there?
Not good.
Nasty.
We've had Mobile level dew points up near 80. Those are going down, but the temperature is going up. So, and in case you didn't know this, big SEC Media Day will be in Dallas next year for the first time.
Ooh, I wonder why. Some new additions. I do knows. All right. Well, awesome. And Kim, is it any cooler where you are compared to Rick? Probably not.
Yeah, the 5 miles down the road or so.
Yeah.
She lives on the north side of Norman. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can have microclimates that are part of things, especially with rainfall. But I'm going to venture to say that on this, we're pretty even Stevens. It's a little bit on the miserable side, but I prefer this to the other kind of misery that dominates in our summer. We're either like fire tinder or we're a tropical rainforest jungle. I mean, that's really the two kinds of summers that we get anymore.
Well, you just take what you get. I mean, it is what it is, and that is acceptable. So let's go up the road to Tulsa. James, how you doing on the heat?
Well, given the stark elevation change between Tulsa and Norman, pretty much the same. Going for 102 tomorrow, heat index 108, maybe 110. But I'm with Kim. I'd rather have it this way than cracking up and drying out and burning.
Or cantaloupe size hail. Yeah, whatever.
Show title. That's a good preliminary. That's a very early show title here. So let's go up north. Jen, you're in the Arctic Circle up there. How you doing?
Yeah, it's a nice 79 right now in West Central Ohio. I'll take it for sure. The thunderstorm's not too far away, so I'm watching that along with, 18 watches that are in effect across the country right now. And if you see me missing, it's because I've gone to update something. But I have several cities right now under a watch. But it's just so active. It's never like this in July. It's usually just hot and dry, but everybody's dealing with these storms. So I'm pretty busy.
Yeah, and I see Chicago's sitting at 73, 60s around the Great Lakes.
Yep.
So it's not hot everywhere. I mean, it's very refreshing for some parts of the country. Let's go east. Dr. Jacobs, where are you calling in from tonight?
I'm in North Carolina right now, and it's hot but unexpected, pretty dry and really humid. But I'm just west of the sea breeze zone, so I'm getting no relief over here.
Yeah. All right. Well, good deal. Well, let's see. I do believe that's about everybody on the regular side here. So, Bill Murray, I'm excited about this show. Let's get it underway. Go.
Yeah, we decided we'd have a beach oriented show tonight, and everybody invited somebody, so we got a great lineup of characters to be on. First, I want to welcome Scott Brown, who's a student at Mississippi State University. His mom and dad are friends of mine, and he is pursuing a course charged for meteorology. So, Scott, I wanted to welcome you to the show tonight as one of the guest panelists. And I know that you'll dive in and ask lots of great questions because you're going to be one of us. But tell us how you got interested in weather and a little bit about you real quick before we bring everybody else in.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the offer to be on the show. I'm excited to be here with you all. Weather is something that I've always just been interested in. My story is pretty similar to a lot of meteorologists out there, just that having that intense fascination with it as a child and seeing the clouds in the sky and everything happening, just being like, well, I want to, know more about that and learn about everything that's happening. So it's something that I've always been interested in, and I'm glad to be pursuing it.
Do you kind of have an idea which avenue you want to go down in meteorology, broadcast, weather service? What do you have any ideas yet?
Right now, I'm still open to everything. Looking at any opportunity I can get. So right now I'm open to everything.
That's awesome. Well, we're glad you're here. Get lots of great questions to ask. We kind of try to triage the commenting process over in the chat. But if you're not getting answered or somebody's not listening to you, just jump right in at any point. We're glad you're here, and we'll talk to you a little bit more later this evening when we get toward the end of the show about you and what you're doing. So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And I'm excited tonight to have the two beach safety chiefs from Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, Alabama, which are the most beautiful beaches on the Gulf of Mexico. All of them along the Alabama Northwest Florida coast are special, but the ones in Alabama, Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, are really special to us. Joe Ethan Phillips is the beach safety chief for Gulf Shores. Joe Ethan, thank you for putting the show together tonight with your colleague there. So how are things doing tonight? Or do I see some beach out the corner window there? Is that how you position the? Did you position the camera just to tease us?
Just a little bit. If you turn it this way, then you'll see.
Oh my goodness, that's the best seat in the house right there.
So we're excited to be here.
Now the biggest question: can you guys show us the way to the beach? Like,
that's Brett. He's very, very good with his muscles and showing.
Yeah.
So Brett, welcome to the show. You're the beach safety chief of the city of Orange Beach. And for those who aren't familiar, I can't believe there's anybody, but Gulf Shores and Orange Beach are sort of next door neighbors there in Baldwin County, Alabama. So Brett, welcome to the show.
I appreciate y'all having us on.
Well, of course, the death toll from rip currents is just way too high, and that's why we've got you on here tonight. But today, literally, everybody was so excited about the show, and they started inviting other friends over. Dr. Neil Jacobs, I'll toss it over to you, and then Rick, and you can introduce our other two guests.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce Vicki Olivas. She's a Met at Wilmington Weather Service Forecast Office and runs their surf and rip current forecast. And this, when I saw the topic of the show, it's personal to me for a lot of reasons. Just, one, I spent a ton of time in the ocean, but also when I was at NOAA working directly with Bill LaPenta on the Unified Forecast System, that was when he drowned in Duck from a rip current on a beach that I basically grew up surfing, and I know backwards and forwards. And at that point, it became pretty personal to me, and I've been working a long time with Mark Willis, who used to be at Surfline, and now he's in the Weather Service, and we've been talking for years about how to improve the services here. So thanks, Vicki, for coming to the show.
I'm happy to be here. Yeah, just I kind of got into the weather just like everyone else. Just I grew up in New York City, so I love the snow and thunderstorms up there. Came down to North Carolina for NC State and ended up at the Wilmington National Weather Service office 5 years ago. And I've been the surf program leader for about just as long. So I'm very passionate about increasing rip current awareness so that we can get these numbers down. So happy to be here this evening.
All right, and Rick Smith has invited a friend of the podcast who's been on before. Rick, why don't you introduce Morgan?
Yeah, absolutely. When I saw we were talking Gulf Shores and Orange Beach and rip currents today, we couldn't do that without having Morgan Berry with us. Morgan's been a forecaster, meteorologist at the Mobile office for like 12 years now, I think I read online somewhere. And Morgan would put most WCMs in the country to shame with all the outreach work she does, and from the Savvy team that the Southern Region put together, to Safe Place Selfies, to all the awareness outreach, and a huge presence on social media. So we're really happy to have Morgan Berry with us tonight. Morgan, welcome. Talk about a little bit about how you got into weather, if you can.
Oh no, Morgan's mic is not working, and she's not muted. She just probably has to change her settings there real quickly. She's coming to us from the National Weather Service in Mobile.
I need to get that song, the turn it on and turn it off again song. Remember that one we used to play?
If you tried turning it off and on again, off and on again, off and on again. If you tried turning it off and on again, that normally does the trick.
I thought that was Rick singing for a minute. I thought that's pretty impressive.
Not even close. Not even close.
Well, darn. I hope we get Morgan on here, because she does the forecast for the beaches that Joe Ethan and those guys are on down there on the Alabama Gulf Coast, he and Brett. And it would be nice to have her. She has a real passion for this issue, which is one of the biggest killers in her county warning area, if not the biggest killer. Darn, Morgan. So anyway, I'll come back and I'll kind of start. Vicky, I'll let you start. Talk about the meteorological cause or the oceanographic cause, and Dr. Jacobs can jump in here too, of what we call a rip current. And is it the same thing as what my mom called an undertow when we were little? Because we were cautioned in the late 60s, early 70s about the undertow. And I've never had the opportunity to be in one, fortunately. And my question is this too, following along in that, is an undertow, is that a component of the rip current that pulls you down at all? Or are you always bobbing along the top of the water? Because that seems really important to me. It may make the difference whether I ever get in the water again, Troy Kimmel. Because if it's pulling me down, I don't want any part of it. If I'm floating along, I could go out 500 yards with the great whites and figure out how to get back to shore. But everybody struggles so badly when they get in these things, and it is it's a life and death struggle. So Vicky, try to unpeel all that mess I just said there and come up with some kind of coherent answer to it.
All right. I'll address the second part first about the undertow. Those are actually two completely separate phenomena. So an undertow is not a rip current, or vice versa. They have been confused with each other. Rip currents have also been miscalled rip tides more often than we'd like. But no, rip currents don't pull you under. They just pull you away from shore. And a lot of people just start to panic when they find themselves, 100 yards away from the beach, and they exhaust themselves. So they go under due to exhaustion, not because the current's pulling them under. So between waves battering them or just panic, they just get exhausted. So if you can keep calm and get yourself, out of the rip current back to shore, that's your best bet. As far as the first part with the meteorological, mostly what we look for when we're forecasting is we're looking for waves to come in directly onshore. We want them coming in perpendicular straight onto the coast, because that's the best chance for the water to pile up and look for the best, path of least resistance to go out, which will turn into that rip current. Typically you want higher wave heights or longer periods. So long period swells from hurricanes, or 4-foot seas from just local wind waves. Those kind of do it. Just, you want that straight onshore. At or around low tide or on a rising tide is definitely tricky. But yeah, that's the short and long of it for what we look for.
So Morgan, have you worked out your sound issues? If you unmute, can we hear you now? Aha, that's perfect.
Okay, good. Sorry.
All right, so Vicky's laid out the what you're looking for. What are you using to forecast? What models? What helps you as a meteorologist when you're writing that surf forecast every day from your Weather Service office?
So we are using a variety of data. At least here locally, we have a lot of local research for our specific area that goes into kind of assessing the risk. So we are looking at things like the prevailing synoptic wind direction and speed, the swell properties, as well as the tidal ranges. In addition to looking at when does low tide actually happen. So we're kind of compiling all of that. We're looking at the observations in the morning, usually 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning is when we're coming up with our surf forecast here locally for the northern Gulf Coast. And then we will refine that as we go through the day. So we will look at the observations. We will take the feedback from our partners, especially our beach partners down in Gulf Shores and Orange Beach. And we will tailor the forecast from there. So if it's not panning out the way that we thought that it should, then we will increase or decrease the risk throughout the day.
So the two chiefs that are on here, Joethan and Brett, you're getting this forecast. Are you giving feedback to Mobile in your case every day, or just occasionally, or when you see something that's developing differently from what the forecast said?
Essentially every day. It's as easy as a couple clicks. They have a Google Docs form that they share with us. So once we get into work and on the beach in person, they really want us to kind of drive a section of beach and look at their forecast and compare it to what the naked eye is seeing out on the beach. Make sure that everything's matching up, lining up. From there, we submit the Google form, things like wave height, what the rip current value is, whether it's low, medium, or high. And then it has a comment section where we can add items in there, whether it's like a strong lateral current or if the waves are crashing perpendicular to shore. So if we see a bunch of rip currents and it's a moderate or a low risk, we'll try and advise them, hey, we think the rip current risk should be increased at this point, kind of based on what we're seeing.
Now that sounded kind of important when you said that, Chief. You said about a strong current or waves crashing directly on shore. Talk about the two different cases and how that portends differently for the forecast.
Yeah, so Vicky kind of touched on it. The waves that are crashing perpendicular on shore is really what scares us. When we have a strong lateral current to the east or the west, it kind of overrides the rip current risk. So rather than people moving away from shore, they're either moving east or west down the coastline. So while there still might be some rip currents running at a diagonal rather than north and south like you typically think of them, they're not as strong, or somebody won't stay in them for very long.
So if I end up in Fort Morgan or Pensacola, I'm probably not going to be the victim of a rip current. I'm just going to have a long way to swim back or walk back to my beach towel, huh?
Exactly, and you'd be shocked to see how far some of these young children get. They'll end up a half mile from where they got in, and it happens at the blink of an eye.
Yeah, I've been in the Gulf when it's like that, and I've been in the Gulf when those waves are crashing over your head, and it is very, very scary. Even if you don't get into an actual rip current, you get beat to death and could easily drown, in those hammering waves.
Yes.
Anybody want to jump in there and say anything about that? Because
So
I mean, you get over about what 2 or 3 feet, you're getting into some really dangerous wave conditions.
So I'm a Texas Aggie, so you got to explain things to me. East and west beach. Let's say they're somewhere along the Florida Panhandle or Alabama coast. Direct east-west running beach. Vicki, are you saying that you're looking at a situation that's going to create more in the way of the rip currents when the winds are directly out of 180, or when they're more like 140 degrees, or explain that to me a little bit?
There you go, Troy.
Well, in the Carolinas, we're north to south beaches, but we also have south facing. So it doesn't have to be exactly 90 degrees, maybe somewhere like 60 to 100, or like somewhere within perpendicular. Once you get towards that parallel is when you're going to have those long shore current problems that the Gulf guys were talking about. So it doesn't have to be exactly, but within probably like 30 degrees, give or take.
So if you're in a beach around Mobile, and let's say it is an east or west beach, like Morgan has to deal with, a wind out of 180 degrees directly from the south, is that more? Again, I want to make sure I'm getting this right. Is that more conducive for rip currents, or is it less, or is 110 degrees going to be more conducive?
So for our area, we're not exactly west to east.
Yeah.
We are along a lot of our coastline, but we do have some intricacies where, we jut out a little bit. So just slight variations in the wind direction can lead to drastic differences between what we'll see in, say, Destin versus Dolphin Island. So just small differences in those winds can lead to drastic differences sometimes. So we're usually looking at southerly to southwesterly for a lot of our beaches.
Now, what about presence of sandbars, maybe subsurface water features geographically? I assume that also affects this as well.
Yes. Anytime the topography of the beach, if you run a bunch of days where you have a southwest or southeast wind and the rip currents are picking up, that's pulling sand. We have fine sand here, so it's pulling all that out to the sandbar. It's looking for that area of least resistance, and it's changing the way you're going to go with inshore holes that are going to affect people. Even when the rip currents are done, the next couple of days after that, you may have a north wind, but somebody steps off into an inshore hole and is not able to swim, it can be just as dangerous as a rip current.
Thanks.
So Dr. Neil Jacobs, you've done your share of surfing and probably utilized a rip current or two along the way for transport. Talk about that and any other death-defying experiences that you've had.
Yeah, I mean, I usually only go to the beach when there's a pretty solid swell, and the longer periods the better. So like tropical swells, nor'easters, and then in the Pacific usually the swells are longer period anyway, but you don't get a lot of rips on reef breaks like you do on beach breaks. And for things like the Outer Banks, one of the easiest ways to get out into the lineup is find a rip and hop in it. And I'm not recommending anybody do this unless you know what you're doing, but you can, when I hop on my surfboard and paddle out, if I position myself in a rip, it pulls me right out to the lineup. And then you just paddle, one way or the other way to get out of it. And sometimes they stay in one place, and sometimes if there's a little bit of angle to the swell, the rips will form and then kind of drift in a certain direction. So, obviously they tell people swim parallel to the beach one way or the other. Just don't swim straight back, because you're not going to out paddle one of these or out swim one of these things. I mean, they're going at a pretty high rate of speed. And then it's relatively easy, but I would say maybe at least once out of probably 8 or 10 sessions that I've been surfing, particularly in the summer. Like, you don't get a lot of tourists that are going to like Outer Banks in January. and getting in the water. But in the summer, the tourists come and they don't know the currents. They don't understand like what to do in the situation, and they get out and they get sucked out and they freak out. And usually if they're lucky enough, someone like me or somebody else out there with a surfboard and just paddle over to them and push them the board. And once they get something to hold on to, they're, they calm down a little bit. But there's a whole nother way to approach these people, because they'll flail and beat the crap out of you too if you're trying to help them.
Well, that's a good question for our chiefs there. You guys are doing way too many rescues on the beaches. Talk about that process of how our first responders and lifeguards work to get folks safely to shore.
So what we're going to do is when we approach the victim, we're going to stay within 5 or 10 feet. That way we're not actually right on top of them. We're going to gather our rescue equipment if they're conscious and able to listen to us, and kind of introduce ourselves, let them know that we're there to help them, and then pull our can and hand it to them if they're able to hold on, and then just kind of let them know on the way back in what's going to happen. Whether we have a jet ski that we're going to stay outside the break and the jet ski is going to come get us, or if we're going to swim back through the break, and let them know that hey, we may catch a couple waves, but as long as we hold on, we'll be okay. Just close your mouth and we'll let you know when that happens, based on the sets that are coming through. And we get them to the beach, obviously, and then check for medical stuff.
Well, that just makes me feel better just hearing that you guys are doing that. I imagine that is just like an angel of mercy coming when you've been through that situation. Chief, talk about any myths, and then I'll turn it over to the coastal Mets there. Any myths or other things that you battle in dealing with the public about rip currents?
Rip currents is tough compared to any other weather related event that you could have. People see the danger. When you're talking about a fire or a flame, they associate that with danger. Tornadoes, hurricanes, things of that nature. People associate that with danger. The problem that we have is rip currents are tough enough to spot for someone that's not trained. But then people have a tough time associating a rip current with danger. So we really want them to understand that anytime that we're advising a high rip risk or flying single red or double red flags, we just didn't wake up that morning and decide to do that. It took
just to ruin their day.
Right, exactly. So it took a lot of training, and Morgan's team kind of keeps us advised on what they're seeing on some of the weather forecasts behind a desk, and that helps us a lot kind of make some of our front end decisions. So when we come to things like single red flags or double red flags, there was a lot of forethought that went behind that.
And just because we're not flying double red flags, we're only flying single red flags, we still advise that it's not safe to enter the water, and that there is a lot of danger in that for the normal person. It's just not the threshold of double red flags for us. But so we want to make sure that people understand when there are red flags flying that knee deep is too deep. We don't want you in the water, and we don't recommend it.
Morgan, that sounds like a good slogan right there. Knee deep is too deep. I bet we've used that, have we, Vicki? So talk about, go clearly into the difference between a single red and a double red, because there is an important distinction there. Really, it's not safe for anyone, even at the single red, unless they're experienced swimmers like Dr. Neil Jacobs.
Exactly. So we want people that are very confident in their abilities on single red flag days. So we've talked about a multitude of different things, whether it's the heavy shore break that could knock an elderly person or a young person off their feet kind of on the shoreline. That's why we say knee deep. A wave hits you in the hip. It's very powerful. As far as single red flags, we're talking about surf height generally above 3 foot. So if it's 3 foot and extremely choppy, that's going to more than likely be a red flag day. Once you start to get to the 4 foot range, it doesn't matter whether it's clean waves or anything like that. It's still probably going to be a single red flag. We wait specifically for Morgan and their crew to give us a high surf advisory. That's typically when we decide to fly the double red flags. And correct me if I'm wrong, Morgan, I believe that it's 5 foot plus is when the high surf advisory kicks in.
Of course, now that you asked me a question, now that I forget, it's either 5 or 8. I forget off the top of my head.
Yeah, so I mean, double red, you're talking about waves that are well over a person that's surfing, well over their head. So, that kind of indicates it doesn't matter the strength of the rip currents at that point. The power of the waves alone is a danger to anybody that is not familiar with the water.
And what you'll notice here that's different from, maybe the Atlantic coast is our waves or our periods they're back to back to back to back. So it may be only 4 feet here where, we may be flying double red and they're flying, they would never fly double red for a 4 or 5 foot wave, but it's just the consistency of how fast it comes in here. And it's never clean. It's always a washing machine down here. And we take that into consideration. And a lot of times, if it's right on the edge, we always err on the caution of safety, especially it may be okay for an adult, but a kid is also going to see that adult that may be able to stand up right there and then get swept away by a rip current. So we take all those things into factors when we're putting up double red flags. And it's not lightly. We don't like to do it, but for safety, we have to sometimes.
So Vicky, comment on that for your office, what the chief said there.
Oh, regarding the washing machine or
regarding the heights and thresholds that you use as guidelines for when you recommend a high rip current risk.
Yeah, like you said, it's definitely different on the Atlantic coast. Our high surf advisory is 6 feet, though our local lifeguards agree that once you get to 5 feet, it's kind of dangerous for anyone besides for like experienced swimmers or surfers to be out in the water. But our local, we've been collecting rip current reports from our lifeguards since 2004. So when I looked at past reports, we start seeing like moderate strong rips as soon as you get to surf heights of like 2.5 feet. And then once you get above 3.5, it's very rare to get no rips, unless you have a really strong longshore that's just wiping them all out. But once you get to that 2.5, 3 foot range, your chance of rip currents definitely increases.
Talk about what happens when you get a tropical storm or other tropical cyclone somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico or bypassing you there on the East Coast, Vicky. So Morgan, it seems like to me one of our deadliest events was during Tropical Storm Allison back early in the 2000s. It was a terrible, terrible week along the Gulf Coast. Talk about the effects of a tropical cyclone when we added in the mix.
Yeah, so speaking of that, the National Weather Service will eventually, hopefully sometime in the near future, be releasing a new infographic that we just finished working on, actually about distant hurricanes. So it relates to trying to get tourists and trying to get people's attention because we see a lot of folks get into trouble whenever there's a hurricane on the opposite side of the Gulf or a couple states away, because we get that swell that comes in and it makes it very dangerous across, say it like our local area, but yet it's bright and sunny outside. And we don't have hurricane warnings here. So folks think, oh, it's fine, I can go into the water. They completely ignore all of the beach flags that our beach partners have flying. They ignore all the signs, they ignore everything, and they go straight into the water. So distant hurricanes is a problem that we battle with in terms of messaging. And so hopefully in the very near future, that graphic will be showing up.
Morgan, did the surf forecast start in Mobile, or did it come from somewhere else initially, or was it a headquarters mandated product for a long time? What was its history?
That's a really good question that I don't know the answer to off the top of my head. Now, we have been doing forecasts here for a long time, much longer than what I've been here. I've been here for almost 12 years. I know we did them. I worked at the National Weather Service over in Tallahassee. We did them, prior to that time frame as well. So it's something that the Gulf Coast offices have been running with for a fair amount of time now, but I'm not sure exactly when it began or which office started it.
And as you worked in Tallahassee, they have a bigger variety of attitudinal directions of the beaches. Does that make it more challenging, or is it just more different forecasts?
It's completely different over there because of the shape of the coastline over in their particular area. So they have a lot of challenges over in their area, and they have the same messaging challenges that all National Weather Service offices that are along the coast have. But in terms of the actual forecasting, they definitely have more of a challenge in terms of trying to figure out which stretch of coastline deserves a high risk versus which is maybe not as high of a risk for that particular day. So the swell direction as well as the wind direction really plays a kind of a key role over there in Tallahassee's area.
James A., you want to jump in there? I'll ask Morgan one more thing that just occurred to me before I go to you. We live and die by your surf forecast every morning, even up here in Birmingham, because a lot of our people are coming south, literally now 12 months out of the year, it seems like. And we communicate that in our beach forecasts every single day. So it's really important. And James always picks up the tweets from the coast every morning. And we're going to get into education and process, especially with our chiefs here in a minute. But are you getting widespread usage of your forecast, Vicki, and you too there on the North Carolina coast?
I like to think we do. I know it definitely gets high usage by our partners, the emergency managers, local media people. Whether or not the public uses it outside our local residents is a good question. I'd love to be able to see what, if people from Raleigh, for example, or Central North Carolina are checking the surf forecast. It's probably not as good as we would like, but unfortunately we can't see who's viewing it. I just know at least our local people are.
Well, it sure has a lot of play with us. I look at it every single shift that I forecast because this unbelievable death toll haunts us tremendously up here, 250 miles away from the beach. Morgan, anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I think that's one of our biggest challenges is trying to get that forecast into the hands of the people that will use it the most. A lot of folks, a lot of the tourists that are coming down here to visit our beaches, they don't follow us on social media. They might follow, the Birmingham market, but they don't follow the Mobile and Pensacola market. It's difficult for us. That's why we've tried to make a big push over the last few years, trying to get inland markets to pick up the rip current risk, to get inland National Weather Service offices to post that information. And I feel like we've done a fairly good job of pushing that out to the offices and to the media markets in the Deep South, one tier inland, especially from kind of right here along the coast. But further inland is still a struggle. People only come down here for 1 week out of the year, if that. So it's a struggle to try to get them the forecast and try to prove to them that, hey, today is a better day to go to the beach, maybe not the next 2 days. And just simple things like that could potentially save some folks' lives if we can get that forecast into people's hands.
Morgan, I think that's a perfect segue to one of the vulnerabilities that we're talking about here, and that is people even inland probably aren't focused on this as a risk for them. And then if they're on vacation in your area on the coast where they need to be focused on this, the last thing most tourists want to do is worry about their personal vulnerability or risk to an ongoing hazard. And I mean, you're getting into some deep seeds of psychological behavior here. And I'm not sure how you get this word out. It struck me this summer seeing that toll to generate the rip current, safety post on my social media. And it's something that every meteorologist probably ought to focus on that's within a day's drive from any beach.
Yeah, and that's something that So our office here at the National Weather Service in Mobile and the National Weather Service over in Tallahassee actually kind of teamed up a few years ago to create Rip Current Awareness Week. But one of the things that we did was create a huge webpage. And it's got all sorts of information about what rip currents are. But we also just recently added all of our content, all of the social media content. So it's got information that you can copy and paste and put it on social media accounts. It's got graphics. We're working on getting everything also in Spanish. The Spanish outreach team is helping us with that. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible on those of you who are at inland TV markets, who are at inland National Weather Service offices or EMs and things like that, because we know that you all don't necessarily understand all of the inner workings of what a rip current is, or maybe the best wording to get a response out of the public. So we've tried to compile all of that and make it as easy as possible on you all to just copy and paste all of it and put it on social media. Steal all of it. I don't care.
Yeah, I think just planting that seed is half the battle for us inland type.
Yeah, planting that seed, so important. I just, as an inland person, I just know almost no one from the middle of the country knows what this system means. And you guys are, doing a good job, talking about all these important thresholds for the different flag colors and the numbers of red flags. And, I hear this and I just think, if you're someone who has no knowledge and you're walking along the beach, colors can just mean so many different things. And, red can mean danger. It can also signify that, hey, there's ice cream for sale over here. Like, it's one of the most commonly used colors in food sales also. So, I think we have a huge challenge before us. And even if you have 2 flags and people do infer danger, you don't necessarily know out of how many are possible. Is it 2 out of 5? But for you guys, you're like, 2 is the worst. And so I just feel for you with the enormity of this challenge and everything you're doing, and just naming it and starting to talk about it is an impressive change. I've heard it discussed now outside of even just weather circles, and it wasn't even a thing. I grew up near Lake Michigan, where they do have this as a concern, and it wasn't something we ever talked about. We did talk about the undertow, never talked about rip currents. So I'm impressed that there has been that change. But I want your thoughts, all of our guests. Let's really focus on the numbers of the fatalities this year and talk about what's going on. So there have been, what we were looking at this earlier as a team, it looks like 60 or so fatalities that are rip currents specifically so far just this year. And on average in the US, across the whole country, a typical year, it's 71. We haven't even gotten into hurricane season, when you get those tropical systems that are going to push all that swell up into the Gulf, like you were talking about, several states away, or along the Atlantic coast. And when a lot of this is typically probably the time when more people are susceptible to these hazards. So what is going on? Is it that we have other things that are driving really bad rip current conditions that are far outside of the norm? Are more people packing into beaches? Like, what is wrong with this year? Last year, we had, I think the total was something like 65 all year, and we're already almost there. What is going on?
So we kind of want to talk about, y'all talked about not knowing the flag system and stuff like that. So an initiative that we've came up with, along with our tourism department, that we've started here, it's called the Beach Safe Initiative. So we saw somebody comment about a rip current flag for a magnet for the refrigerators. We have that. Another thing that we do, we have stickers. So we got with our local communities, the city of Orange Beach, the city of Gulf Shores, and Fort Morgan, the Alabama coast, to come up with a campaign that's catchy, that we can, that's card inserts for everybody, every card that you get.
Key card for your hotel room.
Oh, wow. That's
some of the things that
we've
we've
hotel
done.
here, I'm loving that.
Yeah. And because we know when people get down here, the last thing that they're going to do is, when they're on the beach, is look at things.
Coloring book at a restaurant for kids. It's got your
wow.
graphic, crossword puzzles.
So we came up with like the coloring placemats. So all of our local restaurants have that in their restaurant for the kids to play. That way, if the kids play, they're asking questions to their parents, and that's striking up a conversation.
That's at the exit of every condo on a double red flag day. It's like a tent style.
So we're working on that locally. We've gotten, when people are here, but we also know that Georgia, Louisiana, all these people are coming from across the country that we're trying to reach. So last year, all of our lifeguards made contact with 5 people a day. So that's over 150 answers a day. They were giving questionnaires. Where are you from? How many people are staying? Do you know what the flag means? Can you tell us what the red flag means and all that? And we gathered all that information. Can you tell us what a rip current is? And we took that information and gave it to our tourism department to see where we're going to put the money in to spreading awareness. Because a lot of our drownings, we'll be frankly honest, it's not the people that live around here. It's people from Louisiana, Georgia. So our local EMAs teamed up with us as well. They've talked to the state EMA, who is reaching out to EMAs across the other states to bring the beach safe awareness to the surrounding states, just so we can learn more and spread more awareness about beach safe before people get here. We know once they get here, the damage is pretty much done. They're on vacation mode, the light switches, and it's different. So we can't, lifeguards try to talk and educate as much as we can on beach safety when people get here, but we can't talk to everybody. So it's our goal to get it before they ever touch the sand.
This is
got
amazing.
some great suggestions going here. Neil, say what you were going to say.
I mean, I think it's an awesome idea, and it's effective. It's cheap. There's no downside to it at all. I mean, I won't name the location, but we tried to do refrigerator magnets with a graphic of how to get out of a rip current and get a lot of the rental properties to put them on there. And a lot of the owners of the properties pushed back, claiming that we were going to scare the renters. And I just thought, well, if they drown in a rip current, they're not coming back. So
yeah, it's kind of like self-preservation for your business. You want them to go back. Once you got them there, you already got their money. You might as well make sure they don't die. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you would be surprised. Well, the Hurricane Center had the same issue when the storm surge folks wanted to paint they wanted to paint the telephone poles like the color of the heights of the different surge, so people could actually walk out there and visually realize what like a 10-foot storm surge looked like. And the real estate people were like, no, you're going to destroy the sales market, or no one's going to want to move here if you do that.
Well, I don't want to admit to my Chiefs here in Alabama that we actually went to Tybee this year on a family reunion. But right across the street from our condo was one of those posts on the library in Tybee that said, this is Cat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what you could expect surge wise. And it was, it was definitely a chilling reminder for sure. James A., you were going to say something. I thought you had a good suggestion. Kim glommed on it, and then I know Rick wants to take us in an important direction.
I mean, your audience, you're centered in SEC country, especially adding Oklahoma and Texas to that, because we've got a lot of people that head down to that area too. PSAs during the SEC football broadcast. That's valuable real estate for broadcaster ad sales, but might be something worth looking at. And, it's the wrong time of season. We're doing that in fall, but again, maybe you're planting the seed.
Well, we just had Greg Sankey on the show, so we'll have to communicate back. And I did hear back that they really enjoyed the show, and we certainly enjoyed that show too. Kim, we didn't get your question answered. Why is it so bad this year? Who wants to take a stab at that? Or is it just this bad every year?
I got to wonder a little bit. And my guys in the rescue probably can, we've come out of 3 years, or is it 30 years of COVID? And people are going outside and they're going places where they haven't in the last 2 or 3 years, even since last year, Kim. And I think they're going there with a vengeance. And I think they be damned anything get in their way. I hate to say it, but they've been inside for the last 2.5 years. I just wonder if that has something to do with it, Bill.
I think it definitely is affecting. I saw some pictures from Panama City from 4th of July that were just shocking how many people were on the beach. Yeah. It couldn't even be enjoyable. But the Chiefs, when it gets crowded like that, that has to increase the complexity. Are there any thoughts ever to limiting the number of folks that can come to the beach? I know I saw where South Walton was talking about limiting non-residents on certain days from coming to the beach, and that's probably not something that has ever come up. But I read it this past week. Have y'all heard of that?
That's not bad for tourism, huh?
Well, no, I think they're talking more about just people driving down the beach for the day, rather than I'm sure that they would not limit people who were renting a condo or staying in a hotel or something like that. I don't know. And, I don't know what the background behind that was, but I can't even imagine when y'all are dealing with a day like that. And then we're still going to try to answer Kim's question even further here in just a second, because I don't think we've isolated the answer yet. But Chiefs, talk about that concern when you get into a busy weekend.
Yeah, we do certain things when we're expecting heavier crowds on the beach, major holiday weekends and weekends with a lot of activities, whether it's a boating event or a local concert or something like that. We plan accordingly. We try and ramp up our staffing. We may add some seasonal towers, as what we call them, in certain spots where we expect heavier crowds to be. For us in Orange Beach specifically, when we're expecting a lot of people in the water, we'll make sure to have a water asset on the water, basically from sun up to sundown, whether that's a boat or a jet ski, something of the nature. We have 8 miles of coastline, so they can kind of just patrol along the coastline where the sandbar is at. If people get out past that sandbar area, they do a lot of preventative actions, telling them, hey, go in closer to shore. It's really not a great place to swim, things of that nature. So as far as limiting the amount of people on the beach, truly, we wouldn't want to do that. We want everybody to come and enjoy the beach. It starts to get political with some of these things. People's enjoyment comes from the beach. They see that on their calendar all the time. They imagine their toes in the sand and in the water. So we just want them to enjoy it safely. And I want to give a shout out real quick to James Spann. I don't know if he does it himself or if somebody does it for him, but we do a 45-second video clip every morning on our Facebook page. It has a full beach report with surf height, water temperature, things of that nature. But it's an actual shot, a panned out shot from east to west of our beach, 45 seconds. He reposts it every day, and it gets anywhere from 8,000, 9,000 views. Like, it's crazy numbers. So people are seeing that and actually tuning in to kind of wait and see the clip.
And I was going to say, if I don't share that, people get mad. I mean, they expect it every morning. And if I don't do it, and it's me, but I got to hop in real quick. I know there's a lot of questions here, but so you got some bonehead. All right. You got double red flags, and some clown who thinks he's smarter than you two and me and everybody else. He doesn't care. He's going out there. What's the penalty? What happens when you see that? Do you do anything, or how does that work?
It is. We both have city ordinances in place that it does make it illegal to enter the water. And for adults, it even makes it illegal for their children to enter the water. So kind of the way the ordinance is written, they're not allowed to even have the water touch their toes. So on double red flag days, the lifeguards are strictly to patrol the beach and advise everybody that the water's closed. Let's say they tell somebody the first time that's in the water, hey, the water's closed. When they come back that second time, we do call a law enforcement officer down there to try and bring that enforcement presence. Now, they're not necessarily trying to hammer down tickets instantly, but if a lifeguard has to enter the water and physically remove somebody, that's when we start to get into discussion of tickets and things of that nature.
Yeah, it is a $500 fine, or it's an arrestable offense. And the local police department, if they're coming to talk to you about it, you're going to get arrested. It's the same penalty. So they have been arrested in Gulf Shores.
Good. Good.
Well, that's what it's going to take. Now, Kim has pointed out that demographically, males have a much higher preponderance to drowning in a rip current. And I'll ask the Chiefs and the two Mets. It seems to me I see a lot of times in the stories, it is an older male who goes in to save a child, and they end up being the fatality. Is that just anecdotal, or is there some trend to that?
That's definitely something that we've seen, especially this year. Whether it's a family member or somebody just that they see it. I guess it's just in a male's blood to help when they can.
Protect, right.
And especially if it's their family member, they're going to do whatever they can to protect that person, regardless of their life that they put in danger. And we don't recommend it because probably 80% of the time it is the person that's trying to rescue that actually becomes the victim, and they get the other person out.
There's just been some heartbreaking stories about that. We had a fabulous eyewitness account from a mom. Shared it on Facebook. James used it as his pick of the week a few weeks ago. It's one of the best reads I've ever seen about rip currents. It was eye-opening to me, as much as I've studied them and think I understand them. But the one thing she made a big point was, well, she went in the water, and nearly drowned. But one of the other moms had the foresight to stay on the beach, go for help, call 911, and get the things going on the beach. And that turned out to be instrumental in making sure everyone was safe at the end of the story. So, Chiefs, talk about that for a minute. What can we do if we see somebody struggling in the water? What's our best course, rather than just going and jumping in and trying to help them?
Yeah. Calling 911, it sounds like the most simple thing, but really that's what starts the emergency services. So even though lifeguards might not actively be on that particular beach, typically they're very close. We try to be within 90 seconds, 2 minutes range of any area on the beach. So dialing 911 will get the lifeguard there. Now, whether you decide to go in the water after the fact of calling 911 or not is kind of up to you. But at least if you get the emergency services rolling that way, for people that decide to enter the water, we typically want them to get a flotation device or something before they decide to go in. Throw, row, then go is kind of a saying that you'll hear people say. It doesn't typically work. There's not rowed items out on the beach like a kayak that you can grab, but if you could throw an item to somebody, it could be anything, a boogie board, a float, something like that. On windier days, it's not going to work. But last ditch effort, you could try and give somebody some directionals. So kind of what you see on the rip current sign, having them swim parallel. Yes. And trying to get them to flip on their back and float and tread water. So we talked about kind of at the start of the show that people exhaust themselves out. It's like the most intense workout that you've ever been in when you're fighting a rip current. Really, if you float on your back and you tread water and you relax, the rip current eventually will subside. So don't wear yourself out. Most people can tread water for an extended period of time. So try and roll over on your back, tread the water. And that's something that you could holler out to somebody that's in the water is roll over on your back, tread water, stay afloat. And then hopefully the lifeguards will be there soon enough.
I know just one thing she mentioned was don't carry, what would the word be? A floatable ring or whatever. A noodle was better. Is that really true advice, or is there anything that backs that up? Do you not want to go, do you not want your kids on a one of these inflatable blow up rings, or what's the deal with that?
The reason for that is if it can inflate, it can deflate. So if you're out and it deflates, then you're sinking to the bottom. Anything that, you take a noodle though as well, if they fall off that noodle or anything, they're in the same situation. So the main thing is to have something that you can secure to you, like a life jacket. That if you can't swim, we recommend, and USLA recommends, learning how to swim, but also having a life jacket. Because that's going to keep your head above water and it's secure to you.
And we went kayaking in Tybee, and we wouldn't have even thought about getting on the water without a life jacket, but we would go to Gulf Shores all day long and jump and play in the waves and not have one on. And that seemed to me to be a pretty important piece of advice for parents with young children.
If you're going to spend your money on a flotation device or something of that nature, it needs to have a leash on it. So a lot of these boogie boards will have a leash. You can attach it to your wrist or to your ankle. If you get separated from it, it's only a few feet away from you to where you can pull it back and get to that float. So the inner tubes and things of that nature, when those big waves hit you, a lot of times the flotation device will catch the wave and finish pushing to shore. It's not going to do you any good if it's not in contact with your person.
James Bandy, you talk to your kids every day when you go out and talk in schools. Is that part of what you talk about? Do you talk about rip currents?
I typically do as we approach the end of the school year, about the time kids and families start going down there, and I think I probably need to do it a little more often, maybe, because a lot of families don't just necessarily go in the summer. I think the best time to go to the beach, goodness gracious, when is the Shrimp Festival? Late October? That's the best. That's when you go to Gulf Shores. Now, the hipsters, all the young hipsters want to go down there for the Hangout Music Fest. No. I'm going for the Shrimp Festival. So, but I think it's important because what we do in schools every day, with the tornado safety stuff, this needs to be part of the equation. It's a big deal. And a lot of the families that get in trouble down there, they don't live in Foley and they don't live in Robertsdale. They live in Cullman or Clanton or Birmingham or Tuscaloosa, and we've got to do a better job up here as well.
I agree with that. Like you said, it's people that aren't from here, and any help that y'all can give us with the Beach Safe campaign, we can send y'all that stuff and get the tools.
Throw it our way, Chief. We will wear it out on the blog up here.
We will distribute it widely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we will. Now, a lot of talk's been going around in the chat here about the demographics and different things. About male and averages, and it skews very heavily male. Seems to be June along the central Gulf Coast, July more on the North Carolina coast. Morgan, you want to address any of those trends that you see?
Yeah, I mean, down here along the northern Gulf Coast, just our stretch of coastline from Dolphin Island to Destin, we've already had 7 rip current related fatalities this year. So that puts us in the 5th deadliest year since we've been keeping good enough records, which would be back to 1996. So it's definitely been a deadlier year along the northern Gulf Coast, and we're only in July. Some of the information that's been messaged back and forth in the chat is talking about it being more male dominated than female in terms of the folks that are unfortunately dying, and that is what we've seen in our local stats as well. We've been kind of keeping track of where they're from, as well as, kind of their age and are they male or are they female? And it tends to skew heavily of people who live much further inland, and folks that tend to be male, tend to be the ones that get themselves into trouble more often than not.
And it was really shocking to see Ryan Mallett, a former University of Arkansas football player and quarterback, pass away in Destin, a 35-year-old man, in late June. That had to hit home to a lot of people, that someone who probably was in pretty good health shape, I would imagine, is just as susceptible to die. Vicki, anything from your beaches trends that tell us a little bit about the demographics?
Well, in the Carolinas, unfortunately, the demographics are quite similar to just nationally. I mean, it is very heavily, I think, like 85% male in the last 23 years. And yeah, we also see about 80% of our fatalities aren't from coastal counties where you're bombarded with rip current, on your TV, in the daily basis. A lot of our folks come from inland Carolinas, or 50% are from out of state. So we have folks from Kentucky or Ohio. Again, those tourists that are coming down that never heard of a rip current in their life, and they might just bypass all the beach notices or whatnot. But yeah, it's very heavily on the inland side and on the mail side. So we've been making great strides the last few years as an agency, getting these inland offices together, helping to spread awareness, but trying our best. But yes, heavily, a lot of inland folks on vacation and a lot of males.
Well, I have to congratulate the Chiefs and what they're doing. You know, how did you guys get into these jobs? These are extremely important jobs, and you know, how did you get chosen for them? And you know, is this becoming something that all of our major beach destinations add to their public safety rosters?
Yeah, so lifeguarding around here is somewhat new. You go to, you know, Fort Lauderdale and all the Florida and California, where it's 50, 60, 100 years old. It's newer here. We were lucky enough to be on the forefront of when that happened. So you see that we're young, but we've been lifeguarding on this beach for 16 years. So we got lucky, you know, just to kind of evolve through it, going to school and being in a fire department on there for a while, and then continuing to work on the beach. It's a seasonal job here for the most part. So a lot of the people go on to move to bigger and better things throughout the years, where Brett and I decided this is what we wanted to do, and we stuck with it. And now here we are as Chiefs. And like you said, beach lifeguarding is up there with fire department and police in our areas now. We've worked hard for that professionalism to be up there with those guys. So when it comes to preventative lifeguarding and how we act on the beach, we make sure that we hold that standard high so we can be up there with them.
Well, this is an important thing for you mentioned your work with the Gulf Shores Orange Beach Tourism, one of the best destination marketing organizations in the country.
Great.
Always has been from back in the days when Herb Malone was in charge of it. You know, it's just spectacular. But, you know, this gives you an added peace of mind when you're choosing your beach destination, when you know that the public safety officials are concerned about your safety. And I congratulate you for reaching out to the to all of the you know, all the tourism assets down there and getting them engaged. Now, Rick Smith has dug up an important study, and we keep coming back to this, and I want to keep doing that because, you know, we're trying to isolate, you know, some things that we can do, you know, some things that help us educate better. So, Rick, point out that study that you located.
Let's see. I've been Googling a lot here. Are you talking about the one, the
Walker and
not Walker, Ashley and the Victor?
And yes, exactly.
Yeah, I was just kind of surprised that they had done a study on that, and I'm not familiar with it. I just ran across the link here. I don't know, Kim, are you more? You said that you had read this and it actually informed you about some of the dangers up in your area, or was that something else?
You know, I'm looking at the specific paper you linked. They might have had a couple papers. They did something also that focused on the Great Lakes, because it wasn't until they did that work that I had any idea that that was something where I grew up. I grew up very close to the southern shore of Lake Michigan. And we had a lot of stuff, you know, that we dealt with the lake, but I never heard of that. We did talk about the undertow. That was something that I grew up hearing about, but rip currents, absolutely not. So their work, I mean, it's just so crazy how recent this all is, this awareness within our own field that these things even exist. The paper you linked, I'm not sure if it's that specific one. I'm mining it right now to see if it has more about some of the general demographics that I'm interested in too. They note in their paper, it looks like for them, men are about 6 times more likely to perish than women. And for some of the places, you know, Weather Service, you're telling us it can be more than that locally where you are, almost 8 times, you know, higher incidents and so on. So yeah, this is something definitely to mine.
Yeah, and I think one of the most, I mean, we've been trading statistics like crazy in the chat here, but I think one of the, certainly the most shocking one I've seen, Morgan, share the one that you just put in there about the number of fatalities locally since '96.
Yeah, so since 1996 in our area, again, we cover from Dolphin Island over to Destin, Florida, we've had a staggering 140 rip current related fatalities just along our stretch of coastline. And that's more than double the fatalities from flooding, tornadoes, tropical storms, and hurricanes and lightning combined. Now, keep in mind also with those other stats, the rip current fatalities are obviously right along the beaches. So that's only our 5 coastal counties, 2 in Alabama and 3 in Florida. The other fatalities for all of those other hazards that I just mentioned, those are spread out across our entire forecast area, and we cover 20 counties. So we try to show those graphics to really drive home the point that rip currents are our number one weather related killer in our particular area.
Yeah, it's it's the exact same thing in Eastern Carolinas. We've had 180 fatalities since 2000, and I think the next highest weather killer is tornado at 40. And that's the same thing. It's for all of the counties we cover in the Eastern Carolinas between us, the Charleston office, and Morehead City. And so rip currents are by and far our number one weather killer as well. One thing I will say that I'm quite proud of, it's in Morehead City's area, but the Outer Banks has not had a rip current death in the last 2 years. They've done amazing work up there, the county officials, the beach lifeguards, and I give credit to them. We'll see if hopefully it continues because they've done amazing work. But it's great to see. Because obviously one of the best ways to stay safe is to swim at a lifeguarded beach. I mean, if you're swimming on an unguarded beach, like the chiefs were saying, it takes a little bit longer for the guard to get to you, or for local police to get to you. So always swim near a lifeguard. I mean, they're right there. They can help you out. You're swimming on an unguarded beach. It'll take a little bit longer, and every second counts.
That's one question I had earlier for the Chiefs was when we go to Gulf Shores, we go out on the end of Gulf Shores down toward Fort Morgan, and it's a private beach. It's a community with condos, and I don't even know if they have flags. Maybe they I think they do have flags, but I mean, you're kind of on your own at those places, right? I mean, this is where that education and knowledge really comes into play because there is nobody there to come and save you.
Yeah, there is a beach chief at Fort Morgan, isn't there? Didn't you say to me, Joe Ethan?
They don't have a beach chief. They don't have lifeguards in that area. It's an unincorporated area, and they have somewhat of 20 miles of beaches, and not all very populated, but they do have that, and they're working towards some different things that they can do as far as education and stuff for those areas.
Wow, this is really educational and great stuff. Dr. Neil Jacobs, you had some directions you wanted to take us.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, but we've talked about what causes rip currents and how to get out of them. But what would you say to listeners on how to identify it? And this is obviously easier in clear or blue water when you see kind of that brown. But like, let's say, for example, on the East Coast, particularly in the Carolinas, all the water's brown. So it doesn't really stand out. Like, what are key ways to tell people to identify rips?
I'd love to talk about that. The number one go-to for me when I'm trying to teach somebody about a rip current, it's not a guarantee, but almost always a rip current will be attached to a scalloped out shoreline. And that's a big fancy word that kind of confuses people. But if you've ever been to an ice cream shop, it's an easy analogy that I can kind of make for you. So when that fresh ice cream gets scooped and they dig in the ice cream scoop, it kind of leaves that divot or scalloped out area. That's exactly what the shoreline that you're walking on is going to look like. What that indicates is that there's a deep trough. The waves had pounded and moved the sand away. So that scalloped out area is going to be a deeper area that's leading into the water. That's right where the channel of the rip current is going to be. So if you're walking along the beach and all of a sudden there's a scalloped out shoreline or it's cut away and starts to get deeper, that would not be an area that you would want to swim in. Kind of the other telltale sign is when you look at that scalloped out shoreline, if you look at the waves, there'll be no waves breaking in that area because that's a deep trough. So waves only break on sandbars and shallow areas. So that deep trough is not going to have any breaking waves. So you may have breaking waves on the east or the left-hand side, and then the west, you may have breaking waves or your right-hand side, but right in the center where the rip current is present, there's not going to be many breaking waves there, if any at all.
And another way to look at it is not necessarily on the big rip current days, but on the flatter days, you'll watch the smaller waves where the rip currents were before, and you can teach because you can see just the waves kind of coming in, and they're going to come together, those feeders on a smaller scale, to where you can show somebody right there the feeders and the neck and the head that are only going 5 yards offshore, but they're still doing the same thing that it would be on a bigger scale. So teaching people, getting a group of people to come watch you as the lifeguards, and we tell them, if you see a rip current in your area, get a group of people to come to you and show them what it is, because it is so hard, especially when the brown water is there and it's the washing machine, to explain it to people and for them to see it themselves. So we always try to educate them while we're there.
Maybe one quick follow-up to that. At one point, and this is going to be related to my pick of the week, there was some research done with video cameras, beach cameras that were actually filming the lineup, I guess, so to speak, whatever you call, wherever the waves are breaking. And it was using AI to identify rip current features that were forming. And I was wondering, did that research ever go anywhere? Does it show promise? Are people still looking at that as a potential solution to identify these things? And let's say it does work perfectly, then what? Like, what happens next if the system does identify these things?
Obviously, we'd be big advocates for any sort of technology that would help with this. Any sort of funding or technology would be a great resource to have. I know Surfline was trying to expand their beach cam portfolio. So they've already got a lot of beaches with cameras on them. So we use Surfline here locally to kind of help us figure out the extended forecast. So once you get to 7 to 10 days, we start using Surfline to look at some of the information that they have.
And we're having a conversation in chat about the futuristic technology possibilities here. And I just imagine a world where maybe, when everyone has those Google glasses, where you look out and it gives you information in front of you, right? You could have the AI that's part of that, and you look out at the ocean and it can say, oh, that's a rip current right there. Or, like the likelihood that there is a rip current condition. And maybe that's the high-end sunglasses of the future. I mean, it would be awesome. And crazy as it is, that might be where we're going.
Just don't get in with them.
Yeah, exactly. That's where mine are going to be in the bottom of the washing machine.
Washing machine.
All right, where else y'all want to go here, guys? I mean, we just really admire all of your work. Morgan, Vicky at the Weather Service offices, amazing work. The Chiefs, your American heroes. We appreciate what you're doing day in and day out to make us safer. What else have we left unsaid here tonight?
Kim is asking why is this year so bad?
We're still looking for that answer.
Yeah, we're still looking for that answer. And I don't know if it's just the number of people that are coming to the beach. I know the tourism said last year there's 7 to 8 billion people that came to our beaches last year, or our area last year, that have never been here before. So we've also had a lot more rescues than we had in the past. But we're also getting better at documenting that stuff as well. So I hope that has something to do with it. But I think, we're dealing with a lot of erosion right now that has been going on throughout the years. And I think this is, from the spring till, up to Memorial Day, we had a lot of that spring surf coming in and pulling. There's just more inshore holes, and year after year after year of that. I think it just gets deadlier. And we are looking for a beach renourishment coming this fall and next winter. So I'll be curious to know how that affects it afterwards.
Do you have any theories, Chief, on why that may be?
No, I mean, the beach isn't as high, so it can pull out. It's pulling that water. We're closer to sea level without the renourishment, so it's easier to pull that sand. It's pulling more sand and more water. I'm assuming. It's just a theory that would be worth looking into, and to judge it when the nourishment gets back, because we're going to be somewhat of 8 foot above sea level when that gets back. So we'll have a harder onshore break because it's going from deeper water to shallow real quick. But I'll be curious to see how that goes.
I guess maybe this is somewhat related to that. So Kim and I were talking over email earlier today about known areas where you would get these things. So for example, like the Outer Banks is kind of weird because the sandbars shift around so much. You might have a strong channel between two sandbars that has a big rip, and then a week later it's gone. But there are places that I've seen, like on the sides of jetties, next to piers, groins, things that are actually like permanent structures that just have a constant rip over a variety of swell directions. Are there areas and beaches that you work at or you forecast for where it's almost guaranteed that there's going to be a rip there, and so you just say don't get in the water? I mean, a lot of times up here we have signs, but it's not because people don't want you getting in the rip next to the pier. It's that they don't want you getting hit in the head with a lead fishing weight.
We do have on our end, we definitely have, like you said, those permanent rips around the piers and jetties for sure have those.
So is anything being done to just say, don't go in the water here, because we know this is
at our pier, you can't swim within 100 yards of the pier. Now people do it all the time, but we try to discourage that, and it's not a law, it's just the pier. So the fishermen and the people from the pier will run them off. But obviously people love the surf break as well by a pier.
What about verification? Like, we've talked a little bit about forecasting this stuff, but how do you, and we've talked about fatalities, but clearly there's a ton of rips with no fatalities. How do you verify the rip current forecast other than just visual reports? Or is that the only means of verification?
For us as lifeguards, it's comical because it's caveman style how we verify a rip current, but we swim almost every day for training. So when you see a rip current, you've identified it. The easiest way to know the strength that it's pulling at is just to put yourself in it. So we typically make our younger guards hop in the water right where there's rip currents at, and we see how quickly it pulls them away from shore. Number one, that's an awesome teaching moment for us. Again, like Joethan said, we can get a group around and kind of show them how quickly the person moved away. And number two, it puts the lifeguard in the danger that they could potentially be in later on. So if they do have to perform a rescue in that area, they'll have a better water entry because they know what the topography of the beach is. That'll just expedite kind of when they get there, they know exactly where the rip current is, what the depth of the water is. That way they can, porpoise, get their fins on, things like that. So other than getting in the water, I'm sure that Morgan has some sort of fancy module that they use to calculate. But for lifeguards, it's really just hopping in it.
All right.
Yes,
Kim, were you going to say something? Who's going to speak there? Morgan?
Yeah, but I don't have to. I was just going to respond and say, yeah, I mean, we take a lot of the rip current reports that we get in from the beaches, and we're obviously adjusting the forecast as we go along with those reports, but we're also using that for verification purposes. We have a huge spreadsheet that we've been running for eons now, where we take all those reports and we match it up against not only what they are seeing down at the beaches, but also they have an option in there to say, is our forecast matching what you see? So we can run the stats on all of that. So we've got that for several years now worth of data that we can go back for verification purposes.
Morgan, we actually have LSRs now. You can do an LSR for rip current, and of course you do them for injuries or deaths or rescues as well, right?
Yeah, so anytime that we have a fatality, if we know the details surrounding the fatality early enough or within the time frame to be able to issue an LSR, then we will issue an LSR. Sometimes the details are, I guess, a little sketchy. We just don't know 100%. Is it rip current related? Was it long, like the long current related? Was it, they were drunk out in the water? Was it heat related? So we have to kind of dig through all of that first before we can issue the LSR. But we can also issue LSRs if our lifeguards are plucking a lot of people out of the water and we've had 10 or more rescues within a short period of time. We'll issue LSRs for those as well.
And I guess I ought to say LSR, local storm report issued by the National Weather Service, for listeners and our viewers.
Well, I think we have we've covered a lot of material. Scott, you have anything you want to ask any of these outstanding folks who are keeping our beach goers hopefully safe? Your family travel down to the Gulf Coast?
Normally, when we go to the beach, we go over to Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. That's our biggest one. But I think this whole time I've been sitting here thinking about just how I personally can't recall ever actually seeing a rip current. Obviously, I've heard about them, like, how to get out of them and just the fact that they're dangerous. But I think a good approach to the educational side of educating the public on this would be including more of like a physical, this is what a rip current looks like. These are the warning signs, rather than, just the flag system and what we currently do.
It's like something you can add to the Mississippi State Severe Weather Symposium next year. When those guys do that fabulous show. I know you're involved in that process. Might be a good topic to throw out for potential consideration.
Yeah, definitely.
Dr. Spann, you want to take us to recorded segments, or you got a few hard questions?
Well, no.
I got this conversation tonight.
I got a couple of quick ones here. So I don't know who this would go to here, but so the haters, I attract haters. For those that don't know, there is a hater attractor somewhere in my head here, but I will often share the current, status of the flags on the Alabama Gulf Coast. And often, hey, man, it's never green. You're a bunch of hypesters. So I would give somebody here the opportunity to throw out the answer. Why is there never a green flag flying on the Alabama Gulf Coast?
Yeah.
And nope.
Because it ain't
somebody's got to take it. Yeah, go.
I'll answer that question. Our governing body, which is the USLA, United States Life Saving Association, they're countrywide, and we tried to stick by what they said. If you go to their website, it kind of has a synopsis of why the green flag is no longer recognized. But essentially, it's the beach flag system is supposed to be the same as a traffic light. So green means go, yellow means do with caution, red means stop what you're doing. So that was the intentions of the beach flag system. They felt like green, meaning go, meant that anyone, even without swimming capabilities, could enter the water. So that is not true, especially when you're talking about the open water environment. Joe Ethan referred to inshore holes. So a pool that you go to, a local pool, has the pool depth on the side of it. When you go into the Gulf, you may not know the exact depth of water that you're going into. So if it's over your head and you have no swimming capabilities, you could drown in 5-6 foot of water. So it's as simple as that. Other things are marine life are in our waters. And other things. So we felt like the green flag indicating to people that it was safe and they were more than welcome to enter the water. We felt like it was a hazard. So maybe the yellow flag, it kind of took over where the green flag was. And maybe
maybe that's confusing people, but essentially what we mean when we fly the yellow flag is there are still risks, even if the water is completely calm. That's what we're trying to let people know. It is not a pool, and it will never be a pool.
And yeah, I mean, and forget the rip current thing. I mean, there's things bigger in that ocean than I am, so
there's a shark in the bar swimming right there in about 2 feet of water.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a lot of hazards. I mean, the Gulf of Mexico is interconnected with all bodies of water. So you can only imagine the things that are in the water.
Yeah, there was a bear swimming at Destin and a gator on Dolphin Island, I heard.
Oh yeah, and no matter what it is, they're gonna send me pictures and video. I'll have 18 different angles of it, whatever it is.
Does that mean drones have any kind of capacity here, Chiefs, in the future? I mean, they're using them for sharks in some places. Would drones be a tool in your arsenal eventually? Maybe.
We have a drone that we use, not necessarily for life safety, as far as, because getting that up, and we think by the time that we get it up, fly, we're within that minute, 90-second, 2-minute window to get a lifeguard there. But we do have it for other things that we use. And talking about the green flag, there are days that it could be completely flat out here. We have a north wind coming that's just blowing from the north, that it blows it flat here. But you get on a float, you're taking off to the south. So, there's always caution when you come to the beach, and we want to make sure that everyone knows that when they see that yellow flag, maybe they'll look and see.
And by the way, one pro tip here for everybody on the show: never call the Gulf the ocean. That they will eat you alive if you call it the ocean. Don't do that. So how much of a problem is alcohol when that's involved, or marijuana, the impairment? Is that an issue you see down there with people that get in trouble with rip currents?
For us, it's not. We don't look at that as a factor as far as doing it. We know that generally speaking, yes, that it is, but we're not testing people for alcohol or marijuana or impairment that we deal with. We rescue them and get them out of there. So for us to speak on it, to be 100% yes or no, we don't. That's not something that we test for.
Okay, and Bill Murray, please don't smoke weed when you go down to Gulf Shores. Okay, that's another pro tip here. Okay,
I've made it through 62 years without smoking it, James. I've done pretty good, so I'll keep up.
Right, Bill, we're proud of you.
Yeah, hey man,
I'm an Okie from Muskogee.
And we do need to take a quick break, but before I do that, I got to ask a personal question here. Bahama Bob's, what in the world happened down there yesterday? For those that don't know, that's a very well-known establishment, great food, and there was a big fire. So just give us what do you know?
Yeah, so there was a fire at Bahama Bob's, and our Facebook recently posted that the cause is undetermined. Still, I think the state fire marshal will have to come down and determine what caused the fire. But it's going to put them out of business for a little while. I've seen on social media where some other restaurants have reached out to let them get temporary jobs. But it did catch fire, and like you said, it's one of the staples down here, so it's kind of tough situation.
Yeah, and again, I've been going down there forever, and goodness, I saw that fire. You see that place, and you've been in there, you know it, and everybody's so friendly, and you just hate to see that. So, but
luckily everybody got out. And
yeah, I was about to say nobody was injured.
No civilian injuries or firefighter injuries to report from that fire. So that's always a positive. And the firefighters made a good stop on the structure.
Awesome. So we got to take a quick break here. And again, anybody that needs to leave, you're welcome to do that. I know we've kept everybody here for 90 minutes. We're going to come back after a couple of quick recorded segments and do a quick weather roundup. And we're going to talk about the tropical season here, because we do have a storm, a subtropical depression way out there in one of these junk systems. But we'll talk about the future of the hurricane season, and we're going to do picks of the week. So anybody that can stay, we welcome you to, but if you got to go, we totally understand that. So we will take a quick break here. We will hear from Tony Rice, and we will hear from Jen this week in tornado history. We'll come back with some email, the weather roundup, picks of the week, and more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The moon reaches new phase Monday afternoon, July 17th. That means that the moon will be hidden in the sun's glare for a few days, but will gradually become more visible again as more and more of the side facing Earth receives that direct sunlight. That doesn't mean the moon is invisible. Even with no sunlight directly shining on the lunar surface, a faint version of the moon can still be made out through Earthshine. Earthshine is sunlight reflected off of Earth onto the moon and then back to us. And this time of year, it's at its most visible, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. This is because the Northern Hemisphere is tilted towards the sun during our summer months, providing lots of reflective surface. Now, the opposite time of year can also produce prominent Earthshine as the snowpack across Canada and the northern US states is even better at reflecting light than the land and the oceans. While you're out there hunting for that Earthshine, look for Venus in the western sky after sunset. You can't miss it. The crescent moon will be up and to the right early in the week. This is a great time to look for that Earthshine. Just above Venus is Regulus, the brightest star in the constellation Leo. Up and to the left of Regulus, that's Mars. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokey for more spacey stuff like this.
The devastation is unreal. They're trying to clear streets now. It's amazing the way homes are scattered about. Some we can't even find. That quote is from Lawrence Indermule, captain of the Oakfield, Wisconsin First Responders Crisis Response Team, in an article in the Stevens Point Journal after an F5 tornado tore through his community on July 18th, 1996. The twister struck the small village at 7:15 p.m. Central Time. Numerous homes and businesses were damaged in Oakfield. The Friday Canning Company was leveled and millions of empty cans were carried a distance of over 50 miles. Evidence of F5 damage was seen about 1 to 4 miles east of town. 4 homes were demolished, swept clean from their foundations. We interviewed Tim Hallbach from the National Weather Service in Milwaukee in our original podcast about this event. He explained that ample warning was given, even though the data on radar didn't look like something that would produce a big tornado.
If you were to look at the radar data, it wasn't the strongest rotation that you'd ever see on, typically what you'd see with the outbound, inbound velocities. It was kind of a small couplet that produced this. And I mean, if you look at the reflectivity, it all was the normal hook echo classic supercell look, but the velocities weren't actually that strong on it. Yeah, people had fair warning and were able to get into the basements. Most people here in Wisconsin have basements, so they have a pretty good safe place to go to when something like that goes through.
Along the 13.3-mile path, there were 12 injuries and no fatalities occurred. Debris from this tornado was found near the Lake Michigan shoreline, and there were canceled checks discovered 125 miles away near Muskegon, Michigan. Read our full summary about this event at tornadotalk.com and check out our archive podcast about the Oakfield F5 on our YouTube channel.
Ooh, all right. Time to dive into the email inbox, and just maybe there's something in there this week.
All righty. We have our friend James Lewis, who always comes through with some great emails for us and questions. And he even admits in this 2 simple questions that he asked that nobody may actually know the answer. So we'll see what happens here. But the first question is, why are there 5 levels for SPC severe weather, but only 4 levels for WPC excessive rainfall? They use the same risk name, so it's a little odd to only see the latter only having 4. Do we know why?
It's a Neil question.
I know the answer to that. I may have to go do some research.
You should hunt over to the person who works for NSEP.
Yeah, why don't you answer that?
Yeah.
It's really an interesting thing, because part of the reason that WPC actually started that system was motivated by the nomenclature of the SPC system. But to my understanding, part of it is that they just don't have as many, it's an issue of the forecast problems being different, and they don't have as many, classes that they can separate out reliably in their forecasting. So SPC, their system based on coverage and intensity, they're able to separate out very different kinds of severe weather days. And I guess rainfall days just don't cluster into as many different classes, at least not as cleanly. It's something like that.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, the second question, and I'm not sure when James asked this question if he knew about the repertoire of knowledge that we had on rip currents tonight, but the question is, Does anyone know, would a death due to a rip current from an offshore storm be considered as a death by the storm or accidental drowning in natural water by CDC coding? That's an interesting question.
I'm interested in what our weather service folks know about this, because I feel like with fatality statistics, we hit up on this with tornado statistics that I'm much more familiar with. States encode fatalities differently. So even if they use the same classification system from the CDC, then they might have a different evidence basis that they use to apply the different codes. I'm not sure how that works with the water stuff, and your faces look like you might not be sure either.
Well, Kim, one thing you have to remember is a couple of weeks back, we talked to Landon and Brandon from Guam in regard to the typhoon, how they quickly plucked 2 of their fatalities out that were in water on the beaches during the typhoon. And they just said they were not going to put those. And I think the territory of Guam decided they would not. In fact, it was, I believe, the president of Guam or the leader of Guam actually said, no, we're not going to include those in the storm related because it was a personal decision. And I think that's interesting.
Very good. Thanks, guys, so much. Thank you, James, for such great questions every week. And you can send your questions and suggestions for our guests at email@weatherbrains.com. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. You can find that little link on the homepage of our website. Back to you, Span.
All right.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
We are recording this program on Monday, the 17th of July. And let's go down to Morgan. We have a coastal correspondent here. Neil and Morgan and Vicky, all 3 of you are on. I want to hear about the hurricane season. Thoughts on the hurricane season. Vicky, let's start with you. What's going to happen? August, September, go.
That's a good question. We're not sure. I mean, El Nino's started, and they're calling for an average season, but it seemed like it was off to a hot start about like a month or so ago, and now we're kind of in a bit of a lull, even with Don spinning out there in the Northern Atlantic. But yeah, obviously peak season's still about 2 months away. So we've got plenty of time for the Atlantic to heat up. I think we're expecting a few like African waves to come off in the next week or 2. So might start seeing some activity pick up. And we always keep an eye on that at least on the East Coast for rip current purposes, because come late August, September is when we start seeing really strong rip currents just because of all these storms that are offshore. So I wish I could tell you if it was going to be extra active or not. We're just waiting to see, but we've got plenty of season left to us. So.
All right, Morgan, your thoughts, go.
To add to what Vicky said, one of the things that we're watching is not only the strength of El Nino, but also kind of the offsetting factor, at least for the Gulf, is the insane water temperatures. If we have something that goes into the Gulf and it can tap into, those warm temperatures, the sea surface temperatures, they're, I guess for a hurricane, they're kind of like jet fuel. So that could offset what we see with the impacts from El Nino. So one of the things that we, at least along the Gulf Coast, we will look for during hurricane season when we're looking at the potential for El Nino, we're looking at what we call homegrown systems. So, systems that form maybe in the Southern Gulf, not the ones that are traditionally coming off of the coast of Africa, where we get a week to 2 weeks to watch them spin and give everyone anxiety. We're looking at the potential for some homegrown systems. So we hope that that's not the case, but it's definitely good or better to be prepared and nothing happen than to not be prepared at all. So we're definitely trying to stress to everyone who lives down here to just be prepared.
Dr. Neil Jacobs, your thoughts.
I mean, I think the upper level shear from El Nino is doing a pretty good job of damping the development. But to Morgan's point, the sea surface is just baking in the sun with no way to sort of bleed off that heat energy. So the second that those upper level winds back off, I think you could see a week or 2 or 3 of explosive development just come out of nowhere. But it's got to balance out at some point. So that's that would be what I would be kind of nervous would be, at some point, does the shear lay off and do you start to see stuff just go crazy? But I mean, you talk to folks at the Hurricane Center, they'll tell you all it takes is one storm. I mean, Andrew hit Florida during an El Nino year. So it doesn't mean that it bad things can't happen.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on those SSTs down in South Florida?
I mean, it's hot everywhere. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today about potential coral bleaching events because the sea surface temperatures are just getting so hot. And they were actually wondering, could we get some upwelling and some mixing from a tropical system to alleviate some of these sea surface temperatures to protect the coral? And I just thought, wow, you're getting pretty desperate for a solution to that.
And I guess the sea breeze front doesn't cool you down much when the water's that hot.
No, well, the sea breeze is onshore flow, so that's not really going to induce any upwelling. You get the offshore flow in the morning, but even then, it's not. It's just a transient diurnal thing, so it's not really going to change much. I mean, you're going to need some serious convection with subtropical systems to reduce some of that heat.
All right, and let's go to Troy. Troy, when's it up or high going to move out?
Well, I mean, it's getting to the west a little bit. It seems like it wants to, over the next week or so, position more over the Four Corners region. But, we kind of thought that was going to happen today. And Camp Mabry again today, which is our in-city site, National Weather Service ASOS, was up to 108. That's the warmest we've been all year. It was a record by 2 or 3 degrees today. 108 back on the 12th. These are the 2 warmest days. And I got to give, this shows you, again, these in-city sites where you have the heat island itself. Christopher Adams, and you've got to know this guy. If you go to Twitter, he is a wonderful data guy and a graphic artist at KXAN, our NBC affiliate here in Austin. And he came up with this day. I didn't even realize it, that Camp Mabry, our in-city site, was above 80 degrees for 95 consecutive hours last week, from Tuesday until Saturday. And he and Keith White, who is our climate focal point at the National Weather Service Austin San Antonio, determined today that ties the second longest streak of 80-degree plus temperatures in Austin in history. And that in-city site goes back temperature-wise to the mid-20s. So, I mean, it's interesting. The high can go to Hades as far as I'm concerned at this point. I'm tired of it. The only thing you got to wonder about a little bit, guys, is you build up this kind of heat that Neil's talking about and everything else. You wonder what's going to happen when it finally breaks. And like Neil said, storm dynamically developing. Here in Austin, I was asked a couple of days ago about it. I said, well, I'm going to tell you, the day that happens, something's going to blow away in Austin. Something will blow away. I'm just telling you, it's going to be one of those kind of days when this kind of thing breaks. But it is, it's not on my favorite list at this point.
Heat waves and droughts end ugly. I've noticed that over the years. They really end ugly. So hopefully that won't be the case, but I'm afraid you're right. All right, we got to shift gears. We got to go into picks of the week here. This is where everybody is going to come up with something really cool, something weather related. This could be a website, data source, hardware, software, anything remotely weather related. So for our guests, we're going to go to you last and give you time to think of something really cool. So let's start with Jen. Jen, give us something really good. Go.
So I love reading the National Weather Service discussions. I read several of them every day. And this one was from Tucson. And they had this little blurb: for the first time this monsoon season, there are meteorological signals that suggest that our little monsoon fella that has been so lackluster the past several weeks is about to grow up this week. So I love it. It's when they throw in little bits of humor and then just great ways of describing how things are changing. It really is great, because you have to think that you guys are here. You guys get exhausted. You're like, what am I going to say next? So I love reading these type of little things. It's just really great. So that's my pick of the week.
Excellent. Again, all the links will be up on weatherbrains.com. Rick Smith, I know you have something good.
Mine is kind of lighthearted and it's weather related, but there's this Facebook page called Things Southerners Say, I think.
I love
This
it.
is an older video, but I could watch it every day probably. It's just things Southerners say during severe weather. And I said in the email when I sent this to everybody, probably 75% of the topics that we routinely talk about on Weather Brains are included in that little 3 or 4 minute video. So it is so spot on. It's so perfect. I love it.
No, it's good. That is a great piece of work right there. All right, Neil, what you got? Go.
Is a paper by Rampal et al. Published last November called Interpretable Deep Learning Applied to Rip Current Detection and Localization. And I think it's pretty cool. They're using AI to look at video footage from beach cameras to identify rips.
That's way too cool. Yeah. Some people are afraid of AI. I think it's a great opportunity, and that's a good example. So awesome. We'll be looking for that on weatherbrains.com. Let's go to Dr. James Adelot because he's got to go on TV in 10 minutes. What you got for us?
Mine is for all of us grousing about heat and humidity. Colin McCarthy tweet yesterday, Persian Gulf International Airport, which is on the, oddly enough, Persian Gulf coast of Iran, recorded a heat index of 152. A temp, I believe, was 104 with a dew point of 90. Oh, and their sea surface temps are above 90 degrees as well on the Persian Gulf. So, no. And I went to a heat index calculator because I didn't believe it. Typed in the numbers and yep. Awful.
Oh, goodness. God, yikes. All right. Kim, give us something good.
Yeah, well, my pick, thinking about our topic today and where I'm from along Lake Michigan, I found an article that talks about how Lake Michigan actually is the most dangerous lake in the country, in part because of the rip currents that it gets. So for all of my family friends from the area and, just some things you never knew about Lake Michigan.
Okay, awesome, excellent. All right, Troy, go.
I'm kind of taking Jen's place this week on this one. I found and one of my favorite sources for a lot of weather and other stuff. Cowboy State Daily talked about the Cheyenne, Wyoming tornado in 1979, back on July 16th. So yesterday in history there, it is the worst tornado in Wyoming history and also Cheyenne history, of course. Cowboy State Daily, nice article. But what was really kind of cool, and I kind of wanted Kim and others to see this, I'm including a second link to KCYU TV. It was a 30-minute report they did several days afterwards. And it's interesting to listen to the MIC of the Weather Service office there and talk about this back in 1979. And it's really interesting to go back and look at that in history. So kind of taking a glance back in tornado history this week.
Excellent. All right. So, Vicki, we've given you some time to come up with something really good. So let's pitch it to you. Give us a good pick of the week.
Oh, I guess mine's not as lighthearted, but in the theme of rip currents, I kind of actually drew inspiration for this from what they did down the Gulf Coast. I created a Carolinas Rip Current Awareness webpage at NWS Wilmington that includes a lot of rip current safety information, forecasts, tropical storms, things like that. There's a lot of Carolina stats in it, but it's relevant to anywhere that has rip currents. So I drew inspiration from the Gulf Coast page that they did. That's a lot better than mine, but there's still a lot of great content on there, especially for local folks on the East Coast.
Excellent. We'll put a link up on weatherbrains.com. So Yankees or Mets? Who do you like?
Mets.
See, I'm a Red Sox guy. I was hoping you'd say that. And I'm not a hater. I've been to Yankee Stadium. I'm not a hater, but that's awesome. I love the Mets. All right, Morgan, give us a pick of the week that's exciting and riveting. Go.
I don't know if it's exciting and riveting, but similar to Vicki, my pick is our Gulf Coast Rip Current Awareness webpage that the National Weather Service offices in both Mobile and Tallahassee put together. We have all sorts of graphics on there. We have information about as simple as what is a rip current, how to spot a rip current, how to survive, just some simple tips. as well as all of the beach resources. So the links to all of the lifeguards that are down here along the northern Gulf Coast from Dolphin Island over into Tallahassee's area. So all the way over to like St. George Island. All their social media accounts are on there. So it's really handy for tourists as well.
And these are great resources. And again, we'll put the links up on weatherbrains.com. We'll try and push it across the social media channels. All right, Scott, give us something really, really good. Go.
So my pick is going to be the Good Friday tornado outbreak in 2009. This is one of those events that if you know me personally, you definitely know about this. But basically, if you don't know, it was a pretty large outbreak with the largest tornado being an EF4 going right through Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is my hometown. And that was probably one of the weather events that really piqued my interest in weather. It was a really strong tornado that formed right near my house. We could see it actually drop down. So that's going to be my pick of the week.
So how old were you when this happened?
I was probably, I can't do math, but somewhere 7 or 8 years old.
Okay, like first, second grade, something like that. Yeah, because often people have an event that kind of gets them into this. Is that the event that sparked your real interest in this?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. So what let me just ask you this, because we have a lot of high school kids that listen to this that want to get into meteorology in college. What's some advice about, preparing for college, selecting a college? Just give some tips, and that you've been down that path.
Yeah, definitely. So I go to Mississippi State University here in Starkville. And the main reason I picked Mississippi State was because nowhere in Tennessee actually offers meteorology as a major. So that was my main reasoning towards picking state. But once I've got down here and actually learned about the program and been involved in it, I'm really glad that this was the school I ultimately ended up choosing. There's a lot of good people here. So I'd say definitely do some good research on the different schools that are near you or schools that interest you, and reach out to people in that department, students, teachers, whoever, and just kind of get some inside information on how the department is, and just go into it already knowing some information about the people that you're going to be interacting with.
Awesome. Well, and again, you haven't decided yet, right? You're in that phase where you don't quite know which direction you're going in.
Yeah, I'm doing the professional and broadcast track for just classes. So when I graduate, I'll have kind of both avenues open, but I haven't made any decisions as to which one I'll end up in.
Hey, Bill, he's got some TV hair, so he's already a step ahead of all of us here. So that's some TV hair. All right, Bill Murray, go.
Yeah, James, I haven't heard the foghorn in about 3 weeks, so I was hoping you'd play it to make me think of a cooler, foggier day, maybe somewhere on the Maine coast. James, a great show tonight. Excited next week to talk about the Great Salt Lake with Kevin Perry from the University of Utah. Tabitha Bartow on the 27th, and an SPC show is developing. We have about a 40% chance now of that happening on the 31st. So we're looking for that. We're going to come back on the 7th and talk to Karen Hatfield about heat bursts. So those are just some of the fun topics coming up here on the show. And thanks to everyone for joining us kind of late notice tonight. We put the show together at the last minute, but it's been one of my favorites. And thanks to Vicki and Morgan and the Chiefs. You guys were fabulous. Thank you for what you're doing. It's going to make a difference. So keep up the good fight.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. So again, we're going to put a little bow on this show here. For those that are new, WeatherBrains is typically produced Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, and you can watch it live. There's a video version. Most people listen, we know that, but there's a video version, youtube.com/weatherbrains. But however you watch or listen, we thank you. If you want to get in touch with us, have questions about the show tonight, send us an email. The email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody. Stay
It's a
safe.
great show. Great show.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vicky, Morgan, Scott. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.